Welcome to Love and Leadership, the podcast that helps you lead with both your head and your heart, plus a bit of humor. I'm Kristen Sharkey, a leadership coach and facilitator.
And I'm Mike Sharkey, a senior living and hospitality executive. We're a couple of leadership nerds who also happen to be a couple.
Join us each week as we share our unfiltered opinions, break down influential books, and interview inspiring guests.
Whether you're a seasoned executive or a rising star, we're here to help you level up your leadership game and amplify your impact.
Hello, and welcome back to Love and Leadership. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mike.
And today we are going to be talking about effective leadership teams.
I thought we'd change the name of our podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Love and Leadership and Cats now?
Yes, Love and Leadership and Cats.
Yeah.
Cats don't display much leadership. They're very independent.
Yeah, they pretty much just do whatever they want.
Yeah, which is reverse apropos to what we're talking about today.
We have a very cute sleeping cat nearby.
She's pretty cute.
Yeah, okay. Well, try to post more pictures to support the new title of the podcast.
Yes, Love and Leadership and Cats.
Yes, yes.
Please register that domain. Probably we're the only ones.
Probably, yeah. Well, so before we jump into the topic, do you have any leadership moments for this week?
Well, yes. I guess this week's leadership discussion is all about teams. So my leadership moments really related to my current team. I am changing jobs. We are probably moving, not too far, but far enough that it's just a lot of goodbyes and really looking at the connection and the progress we've made. And they're pretty sad to see me go, which is both a little heartbreaking, but at the same time, I won't say it feels good, but it's like I'm happy that all the things that I've learned and been able to share have made some type of impact. And good teams, they should get very close, right? You're in the trenches, so to speak, and I always experience that, especially working in restaurants and kitchens. Like, you go through a lot of hard times together and persevere and keep moving forward to personal goals and team goals. And nowadays, there's a lot of movement in companies and positions, and that doesn't always sit real well with me, someone who doesn't love change. But I guess that's a leadership moment. Like, you have to learn how to do that. And they have a leadership conundrum too. They have to adjust to a new boss, new director. And that's not easy. That's a skill, right? And I'm sure we'll do that the first 90 days at some point.
I think it's pretty early in the new year.
Yeah, those are skills to learn. But I'm pretty sad. It's been a great team. We've gotten very close. And I'm sorry to leave them.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
For me, I didn't really prepare one this week for once, but I think I've been thinking a lot about self-compassion lately for various reasons that I'm going to be vague about for now, but I've had to kind of learn to show some compassion towards myself, and it's a good learning in that because it's often just so much easier to show that to other people than it is to ourselves, as we've talked about in various episodes. So I guess just a reminder for anybody who needs to hear that right now, as we're coming up in the last final few weeks of the year, take that time to be kind to yourself, even though it's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, and your professional success does not equal your value as a human being, and those are often conflated. And for me, especially, I think we all have value as human beings that is not reflective of what we produce or how productive we are or what our salary is. And that is important to remember that.
Yes, definitely. Even if it's challenging sometimes.
So challenging.
By sometimes, I mean always,
I think there's a lot of high achievers that if you're not actively achieving 24 hours a day, you feel like you're not getting it done. And it's I can't even sleep. Allowing yourself to rest, even normal sleep, can be hard for people. And certainly taking time off and not just vacation, but I have to be now, especially I think in America, we're so wired in. We're on our phones 24/7. We're answering emails 24/7. I keep seeing these memes that European office in August. Like if you email them, the out of office email is like, I'm on vacation for the rest of August. Don't email me. We won't answer. And meanwhile, the American out of office is like, I'm sorry, I'm out of the office from 4 to 7 p.m. today to have a kidney transplant, but you can reach me on my cell phone at any time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not just, so.
I'm sorry if my response is delayed by 15 minutes.
Right? I'm undergoing major surgery, but I will get back to you very soon. Okay. I don't know. We've created a weird system. You got to exist in it, but you got to be compassionate to yourself and do things other than work. Or there's even that, I like words, right? We talk about that. And the word recreation, if you break it down, it is recreation. So I think there's some profundity in that, and I'm still exploring that. But analytics and numbers are not the only thing that will help you progress on the path. So recreate.
Yeah, it's a good time of year to be thinking about these things. And I'm actually excited. We are going to air an episode on Christmas Day, which we expect that most people will probably not listen to on Christmas Day, but going to be talking about doing an annual review for yourself and preparing for your, not that kind of annual review.
Is it my performance review?
Not a performance review.
I didn't prepare.
Not like the kind of thing you would do for work. That's required by HR, but more an opportunity to kind of reflect and prepare.
Sure.
So it's a good time of year for that. So, well, jumping into today's topic, which is talking all about teams, especially leadership teams. And what prompted this episode, so I've been finishing up a program through Brown University and ACT Leadership. I think I've mentioned it on the podcast once or twice. Sorry, one of our cats is just walking all over the other one right now. So love and leadership and cats.
Love and leadership and cats.
Anyway, so this program is on team coaching. It's a team coaching credential program. I've just been wrapping up the final pieces of it. And as part of that, I wanted to do an episode talking more about teams. This is kind of a mini LBC episode because a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is pulling from a book called Senior Leadership Teams, What It Takes to Make Them Great by Ruth Wageman, Richard Hackman. There's a couple other authors. They're all like Harvard researchers, I believe. So I'm going to get into kind of some of that, but starting off with what is a team? So there's a lot of definitions of that, but I like the one, a collective of people who not only share a common goal, but are interdependent in order to achieve it.
So just to be clear, we're not talking about Microsoft Teams because that's traumatic.
Oh God, no. I will never. One of the benefits of working for yourself is you never need to voluntarily use Microsoft products again. I mean, I guess sometimes clients use it, but whatever. For my own business, I will never use it.
I mean, Excel is wonderful. I love Excel. But the rest are
Teams is down. Yes, we are talking about teams of people,
Mr. Gates.
not any software.
Not software. Okay.
Yeah.
Copy that. All right.
Yeah. So that's a team. And then team coaching is a process that helps a team improve their skills and the way they work together, ultimately to help them to achieve that common goal and purpose. So this is a little bit different from individual coaching, which is going to be obviously like on a one-on-one basis. The biggest thing here is like when you're talking about coaching a team, you're coaching the team as a whole. So you're not coaching like the leader as a different level than the rest of the team, right? You're not coaching individuals on the team. You're coaching the team like as a single entity. And a lot of the work that's happening as a team coach is you're listening at what my program calls the L4 level. So I've talked about, I use 3 levels of listening in my own work and the things I talk about, right? And as do they. And they talk about L4 is actually the 4th level, which is you're actually sensing like the team's energy. You're listening to what's happening with the team, right? And if you've ever been in a meeting where you've just sensed this really thick tension, right? Like that's L4 energy, right? So that's what you're doing as a team coach, is you're really listening to that emergent team energy. And it's really focused on like how the team is working together as opposed to what they're working on and like their relationship to their topics as opposed to just like the specifics of what they're doing, right? The team completely retains ownership of their own growth, results, agenda, everything. So the coaching is really about optimizing how they work together. And it can include a lot of foundational work, which is a lot of that's going to be like the development of a team charter. So this is things like vision and purpose, values, norms, goals and measures, and so forth. And then also like helping a team develop skills in terms of how they communicate and work together. And then there's also baked into this is this 60-30-10 rule of team effectiveness. This is from Ruth Wageman and Richard Hackman, who are also two of the authors of this book. But this is basically saying 60% of a team's effectiveness is attributable to like the pre-work that happens before the team is formed or before it's relaunched. If you're doing a relaunch of a team, like that work that goes into who is on the team, the purpose, the structure, et cetera, it's 60% of a team's success. And then 30% of it is about what you actually do during that launch or relaunch process. So for example, developing like a team charter and having very clear norms in the ways that you work together. And then 10% is from like the more hands-on coaching that actually happens once the team is already in process. So really that's a theme of this, is thinking about like the setup of a team is everything really.
As you say that, I'm thinking about like how we work in the kitchen, and you know, the way you set up your mise en place is really super determinant on how successful of a service you're going to have. It's more important than the service itself. If you set up well, if you prepare well, you know, that's the prep, right? And that's the 60%. And you can change the course of your career by optimizing that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Hey there. You know how easy it is to get caught up in the day-to-day grind of leadership? Putting out fires, dealing with endless emails, back-to-back meetings. Before you know it, you've lost sight of the bigger picture. If you're feeling overwhelmed or disconnected from your leadership purpose, I've got something for you. And it's completely free. It's a 5-day leadership reset challenge I've put together. Each day you'll spend just 10 to 15 minutes on a quick exercise. We'll help you get clear on your vision again, boost your confidence, improve how you communicate, and more. If this sounds like something you could use, check out the show notes, or you can go directly to llpod.link/challenge to get your free challenge guide. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Now back to the show.
I mean, some of that is like, this is more conceptual, like team membership, purpose, structure, you know, and I as you read that too, I'm thinking about hiring and how you choose the person to go on your team and the criteria that you use. Because I'm reading Simon Sinek's Start With Why right now, and it's pretty profound.
Just our next episode.
Yeah, and he's really talking about not just customers, right? But the customers buy why you do it, not what you do, not how you do it. And he's just really big on Apple, because Apple very well explains their why. Their why is they challenge the status quo. They reinvent, they challenge the status quo. That's the why. How they do it and what they do to do it are far secondary to the why of it. And do they make computers? Sure. Yes, they do. Is it appreciably better than PCs? Maybe in some ways, but not in every way. And you have detractors. But he brought up something where Apple's advertising is always one person. It's never a group, because they're marketing to people who share their why. They want to be individual and iconoclasts and breaking the norm and rebel. And one of the reasons they're so successful is their why is so powerful, and they hire people that share that why. And when people share your why, they will turn down better offers, more money, more benefits from a competitor, because the alignment is not there. So This to me is pretty profound, and I'm really going to take it forward as I like hire and build teams in the future. And I already had the idea, like, you don't just hire for skills, right? You hire for attitude, but finding people that share your why, that's 60%. And if you get that, the rest is going to fall into place.
Yeah, I think you'll like a couple of the things in what we're moving into now for that too, which is it's funny how everything just fits together too. Like it does. Yes.
Yeah.
That's definitely a theme on our podcast.
Yeah.
It all overlaps. Oh. So the 6 conditions for team effectiveness, this is the bulk of this book, the senior leadership teams. And I really like it. This is based on a bunch of research that they did on what makes outstanding teams outstanding. And it really came down to these 6 core conditions for a team success. And this is really focused on leadership teams, especially senior leadership, like executive leadership teams. But I think it applies to many types of teams. I think the core setup stuff remains true, honestly. So these 6 conditions are broken down into 3 essential conditions. And these are like the basic prerequisites for good team performance. And then 3 enabling conditions, which will smooth the path to excellence and accelerate a team's movement down that path. So the first of the 3 essential conditions is a real team. And they spend some time in the book talking about, like, do you need a real team? Because I think we tend to assume that a team is just like your direct reports are a team, right? But the way a lot of people run their teams is not actually functioning as a team. Basically, there's like a lot of change or complexity or growth happening, which I think describes most companies and situations at this point. You do need an actual real team where maybe you don't need a true team if you have like a holding company. And like, so the executive team where they're really like running completely autonomously, like maybe you don't need a real team. But in other situations, you probably need a team. And there's 4 types of teams. So there's informational teams. So these are exchanging important information about various areas of the business. They're gathering intelligence that might be useful to other parts of the organization, and then they meet regularly to hear direction and initiatives from the CEO. I think this is what a lot of direct report teams default to, is this kind of like informational team. And then a consultative team is basically you're periodically bringing people together to advise about like specific key decisions that you need to make. They're not actually making the decision is the key with this, but they're acting as a sounding board. They're helping provide information, think through decisions. And then coordinating teams are where members come together to coordinate their leadership activities as they execute strategically important initiatives. So, for example, if you have a company that's expanding into like a new product line or a new geography, or they're considering making their team remote, like these are all like areas where you're probably going to be bringing together leaders from a group of functions, and they have this like very interdependent shared purpose that they're working towards that goes beyond just like their reporting structure. And then finally, you have decision-making teams. So these are actually teams that are making these small number of really critically important decisions that are going to be most consequential for the organization. And these are the most complex in terms of how they run, and they're also probably the most valuable. And then it gets into like these 3 characteristics of a real leadership team. So real leadership teams are interdependent. So that means they share responsibility for achieving a collective purpose. People are still responsible for their individual roles. So if you have responsibility for a particular department, you still have that responsibility, but they also work together, they rely on each other, and they use each other's experience, energy, and expertise in order to accomplish a collective goal. And to create interdependent teams, you must insist that team members make decisions collectively on behalf of the entire organization, rather than just simply putting their own interests ahead, which I think is a key differentiator. There's a lot throughout this book talking about like, when you're talking about leadership teams, like you need people who actually see themselves as leaders of the organization, not just leaders of their individual areas.
That's key. That's problematic. Jocko has a whole chapter about that. Sorry to bring it back to that. But yeah.
Every episode comes back to Jocko. And cats.
It's how Navy SEALs lead and win. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
But he has a really good point. It's if you have different departments or a lot of companies now, they have different divisions, or they're really different companies under a parent company. They're required to work together and buy each other's services or products, and they're not reporting to the same people. It can be very difficult to get everyone's goals aligned, and to see the different perspectives from where people are coming from. I think that's really interesting, and we have that in hotels. Like housekeeping and the front desk have different agendas at times, and it's up to the leadership team to really clarify what the agenda is supposed to be and what the actual objective is. And everybody wants to be the star, right? Everybody wants to be the big contributor, I think. And not everyone wants attention, but everyone wants to be important. Everyone wants to feel important. And being able to be like, well, I mean, it's like an orchestra, right? Like, I can tell you when I was a percussionist, I thought every note I played was the most important. And usually it was not, but you have to know who's the solo voice.
What was it, Mahler 5 or something? Is that like the big important, like...
Oh, the hammer blows of fate?
Yes.
No, that's Mahler 6.
Okay, sorry.
But Mahler 5 has...
Close.
Mahler 5 has 4 bass drum. I mean... There was a period that I was the loudest musician on the face of the planet, for sure, for sure. And I made at one point the entire Vienna Philharmonic turn around in absolute shock and just shock that I was playing. And God bless him, Christoph Eschenbach wanted more, and he looked at the orchestra and he goes, "It's okay. He has crescendo." And I was like, "You're a bad motherfucker." Like, I love that guy. But it's like that, right? You have to know which voice is the leading voice, and sometimes you're a supporting voice, and being able to I was not able to do that as a musician, but that's key for harmony, right?
Yeah. An orchestra is a perfect example.
Yeah.
The interdependency is so critical.
Yeah.
Everybody it's also a lot of egos.
It's so much ego.
Yeah.
It's so, everybody's trying to and they're all like world-class musicians, and it would actually be better if they didn't do that. And when you find orchestras, and I would say there are orchestras like the Cleveland Orchestra that actually have more of a team ego, and their ego is about being the most cohesive sounding orchestra on the planet. And that's what they do. They have the best ensemble work. They play together the best. They articulate the best together. And that's their ego. It's not like, oh, I'm the principal flute. I want to be. No, that's how they play together. And that's what they're known for. And like Chicago brass is like that. They're like, we're the loudest brass on the planet, and they have to work together to make that. So that's an interesting concept. Like, how can you get your team's ego to be based on the team success and not the department or the individual success? That's a good conductor, right?
Yeah, interdependency.
I don't know why I'm thinking about music lately, but
I mean, it makes a good analogy.
It's a good analogy.
A lot of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, continuing with the orchestra analogy. So.
I'm sorry. Did you think this was going to be a short episode? this green tea just kicked in.
Oh, no.
We're caffeinated now. Can I have some of yours? I don't think you're going to drink it all.
Oh, did you just pound your green tea?
No, it's not pound. I just need more.
Fine, you can have some of mine.
I'm just going to take a sip. Yeah.
Okay.
This is what happens when you record in the dusk of the December. We're almost at the longest day of the year.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. It feels like the nights
We're feeling it.
Days are so short.
Okay. So anyway, that was a beautiful segue that you then took away with the green tea, but
wow. Harsh.
So so moving forward with the orchestra analogy. So interdependency is one of the 3 like real leadership teams are. Also bounded. So leadership teams know who is on the team and who is not. And everybody else also knows who is on the team and who is not. This is really interesting because they did the research that supported this book. They actually showed that less than 7% of the teams that they researched agreed on who was actually on the team. They had like often wildly different ideas of who was included in the team membership.
This outline from this book feels very Harvard. It is.
It's Harvard Business Press.
It's so intelligent and so like broken down and well researched and like
it's great.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, because Harvard. Okay.
But yeah, so I think that is really interesting, right? So like making it clear who's on the team. Like you think about an orchestra, it's extremely clear who is on the orchestra and who is playing what part.
Yeah, but you know what? You have the librarian. You have the travel coordinator. You have the...
Okay.
But no, I'm not trying to be contrarian. I'm saying like some people have an ego and say only the musicians are on the team.
Well, yeah, there's also it's also an organization.
But the librarian is a very highly paid and difficult position. And that if you have a good librarian, it makes a tremendous difference in the success of the orchestra because they put in bowings, they interpret conductor's notes before the first rehearsal. They play a huge... Your arrogant, like, French horn player might be like, he's not part of the team. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's roll with it.
Yeah, sure.
So that is one thing, especially if your team is we talked about like the 4 types of teams. If your team is a coordinating or decision-making team, especially, you need to have clear boundaries of who is on the team in order to develop a shared identity and that like sense of purpose. So bounded. And then also stable. And with stable, I mean, this is all within the context of the modern workplace, right? But membership that's stable enough for members to get to know one another and like their special strengths and limitations and learn how to work together well as a team. And again, think about back to an orchestra. I would say there's a lot of stability in a symphony orchestra.
There can be, yeah. They'll be there for decades.
Yeah, people will be there until they retire.
Yeah.
So that contributes a lot.
Not always. That's like my leadership moment. I'm like, it takes a year to get to really know people. And then a lot of executive positions, they don't last more than 2 years now. If you look at really high-level C-suite people on LinkedIn, it's like 2 years, 3 months, 2 years, 1 month, 2 years, 4 months. And that's kind of the tenure and it's really hard to get to know people.
Yeah. And that's a big challenge for team stability. It's a huge challenge in the modern world, right? But I like that one thing this book says is that like leaders of outstanding teams use their power and their political acumen to minimize the disruptive effects of membership changes. So like doing kind of whatever it takes to help keep the membership as stable as possible. And like when there are planned changes, doing that in a way that's as least disruptive as possible. That's kind of like paying respect to people who are leaving and so forth. So I do think that was an interesting note.
That's what Shushar was talking about, right? VUCA, right? Mm-hmm. You have to develop that skill, you know?
For sure.
And still it does, but early in my career, whenever we would have a director change, it would be a meltdown and it's frustrating. It can take time to find somebody and you might go for weeks or months that have an open position. And you have to learn to like navigate that in between time, both with yourself and with your team and not be overreactive to it. And that's a whole skill, the VUCA.
Yeah.
The VUCA management.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the first condition, which is a real team. So the number 2 is a clear, compelling purpose. And there's these 3 C's. They don't call it the 3 C's, but I do, of like what a team's purpose needs to be. So consequential. So thinking about what actions are actually critical enough to be treated as the main job of the leaders and not just have their membership of this team just be like a side project that they do once their main role is done. Challenging. So what is this team of leaders up for at this point in its life? And clear. What are the critical few things that only this team of leaders can accomplish? And a couple of things on the challenging that were interesting. They say that leaders frequently over-challenge individual members, but under-challenge the team as a whole, which I think is interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like putting too much on individuals, but not expecting enough of them in terms of how they actually perform and work as a team. And challenge without clarity this is super important, will hurt performance. Mm-hmm. Like the clarity is the hardest part of that. And they provide a process in the book for actually clarifying the purpose. And this kind of goes around first identifying like what are the interdependencies of the team? What are the functions that actually require everybody to be at the table in order to accomplish it? Creating a list of actions and decisions you want the team to achieve and looking at like what are really the mission critical things that can only be done by this team. And then basically turning that into a purpose that you are communicating to the team and you as the leader are owning, but everybody has to be bought into ultimately. And then number 3 is the right people. So we're talking about like team membership with this, right? And this is, again, interesting because I think often teams are just looked at by reporting structure or just default by reporting structure. But what this talks about is like, don't just select people by position or title because they need to actually bring the essential competencies that are needed to work as a real leadership team. So some of the things to look for when you're selecting members of a team. So first off, the core skills, experience, knowledge, representation of perspectives, and functional or operational expertise that you need for the team to accomplish the work. This is kind of, I think, the basics that most people think of. But also the second one is going back to self-image as an executive leader. So picking people who actually see themselves not just as a leader of their function, but as a leader for the organization and contributing to the organization as a whole.
That's some pretty high level thinking.
Yeah, for sure. But it is a difference. And I've been in that role, right, where you start to transition from thinking about the good of the organization, not just the good of your individual function that you're responsible for.
Yeah, that's ideal.
And then not everybody on the team has to have conceptual thinking skills, but you need at least a couple people on the team usually who have good conceptual thinking skills. And this is the ability to synthesize complex information from divergent sources and extract their implications for the organization. So like pulling information from all these different places and being able to conceptualize like what that actually means. That is a particular skill set not everybody has, and you need to have that skill set on a good senior leadership team. And then the other 2 areas that I really like that they found were like actually the most important for predicting leadership team success. One was empathy. Yep. And they actually give like behaviors associated with these, which I really like. So the 3 behaviors they associate with empathy are the ability to understand the content of what a person has just said, the ability to understand the meaning that it holds for the speaker, and the ability to reflect back the feelings the speaker has attached to the content, which I like just clarifying within those 3 behaviors. And then the other one that they found to be most important was integrity. And they're not just defining integrity as I don't believe in stealing, right? They actually, again, tie this to like specific behaviors that are associated with integrity and like lead to team success. So the ones they give are putting enterprise affecting issues on the table, even when it could have negative implications for their area of responsibility, keeping leadership team discussion confidential, it's like not engaging in gossip, actually implementing decisions that are agreed upon, and holding the team accountable for making choices that are consistent with the team and organizational values that have been agreed upon.
So integrity is interesting, and I think it's misunderstood. And I'm not saying I understand it, but it bears a lot of discussion. It is not analogous to honesty.
Correct.
The word integrity is the same word as integer or integral, and it means whole. And integrate, I've seen some explorations of what this means, both for you as like a person and how you become an integrated person. And, you know, I'm trying to remember the book I read on it. I think it was Henry Cloud. I think he has a book on integrity. So it's interesting.
If you think of it later, we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I can look it up. The word in Chinese, though, I don't remember if the character looks like this or this how they describe it, but it's the same as the joint of the bamboo. And it's that joint is incredibly hard and stable. And it's like as hard to cut through as steel or something. Like it's very, 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 very solid. So integrity is not just honesty. There's a much more profound meaning. So interesting.
Yeah, I think it was cool. And I like these behaviors for defining like what it actually looks like when you're doing team selection.
Yeah.
And then the other part of this, because is not just knowing who should be on your team, but also knowing who should not be on your team. And sometimes when you need to remove somebody from your team. And they talk about watching out for derailers. And these are people who are generally going to be low in empathy and integrity. But there's also a couple of specific behaviors that they give to watch out for with people who are derailers. The first is like a victim mentality. So if you ask them about their career, they're probably going to talk a lot about the situations where things were done to them. Things had tales of when they were badly treated, when they're not really showing a lot of sense of responsibility for things that have happened in their career. It's a lot of like, oh, this happened to me. And the other is a tendency to make blanket negative assessments of other people. So these are like sweeping judgmental statements like, oh, he's a moron, or she's a terrible manager. Like looking out for when people are making those sweeping negative statements, like that is a red flag, which I completely agree with.
There's so many people that come to mind. This is very Harvard. They very like scientifically broke it down, but this is a very accurate description of people who are on teams that they're not driving the same direction you're driving.
Yep.
Yeah.
And those are the people, they call them derailers, right? Yeah. Because
that tracks.
They will derail you
really
in your achieving your mission if you don't remove them.
Super tracks.
Yeah. And I really, what I love about this, and just honestly, a lot of everything with coaching in general, is just so behavioral focused. And anytime you can tie specific behaviors to this stuff, it just makes it so much easier to identify it.
Yeah, that's very smart. I mean, you don't want victim mentality. Like, we've all had bad bosses and bad situations and maybe injustices, and those are real. But if you want to move forward, you can sit with that and for a minute, and then you still have to figure out how to move forward. Nobody's going to do it for you. If you're lucky, you'll have a mentor, you'll have somebody to get feedback from, but it is ultimately like you have to have an internal drive.
Yeah.
And take responsibility for yourself, your career, your success, your happiness. I'm saying that as someone who has not achieved all of those things, but I know that I'm not waiting for somebody else to do it for me, or yeah.
So that's the 3 essential conditions. You have a real team, a clear, compelling purpose, and the right people. So the other 3, these enabling conditions, the first one is a sound structure, and they define these 3 areas of structure. So the first is team tasks. This is like a team that is performing genuinely meaningful tasks together. So these are like concrete pieces of work, like figuring out succession planning, moving into new geography, like things that are actually like meaningful work that the team is doing together as a whole. The actual most important one is team norms. And this is super important. And I don't think this is talked about enough at least when I was in the corporate world. This did not come up really at all. But really creating this clear set of agreements, norms, you can call them different things. My coaching program calls them like CTR, like co-creating the relationship. But there's this agreed upon list of shared expectations about team member behavior. So like these are the specific behaviors that are acceptable and not acceptable. And the team agreeing on that is incredibly important. And these can't just be like values. They actually need to be like specific behavioral rules to which the team agrees. So this can be everything from like how the team makes decisions, looking at like how you communicate. And it's also important not to just have the norms on there, but also to have a clear process for like how it's called out when these are not being respected. And as a leader, especially, this kind of goes back to boundaries for leaders, right?
It's boundaries for leaders.
Yeah. Whatever behavior the leader tolerates becomes part of the rules.
But I think it's interesting that it's so clear, right? We're reading all these books now that talk about values on a wall are meaningless without, and Tushar talked about that too. Yep. If you can't action them,
behaviors, behaviors, it's
behaviors. And if your value is we care about people, that is actually meaningless unless you can translate it into an actionable behavior. For instance, when faced with a decision, we will always put our employees before our customers. And that's something that the founder of Southwest did. Right. And it's in Start With Why. And he talks about that. And even though they're one of the most customer service focused organizations ever, they knew that they had to take care of their employees first, before the customers and before the shareholders. Somebody challenged him, do you care about your employees more or your shareholders? And he says, that's actually a very easy question. The employees come first, because without them, there's no company. And if you care about them, they're going to do a good job. And that will create your shareholder value, sir. That's not a conundrum at all.
Yeah.
You know, we put this first. We do this. It's action.
It's like, what does it actually look like?
What does it look like?
Yeah. Don't say you want a culture of accountability. What does that actually look like in behaviors and how people perform?
So we're going to rewrite everything. Like when we see something that is not in line with our integrity as we've defined it, we're going to discuss immediately. Something like that. Anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and this is so powerful. And they found this is like the number one thing that has the biggest impact for structure is having an agreed upon set of team norms.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then the other piece of that is team size. So like having the right number of people on the team, and especially for decision-making teams, smaller is better.
Yeah.
So,
but more than 2, right? Which we know from decision. Yeah, it's got to be at least 3.
Yeah.
You get 2, you get a yin and yang fight.
With team coaching, we talk about between 3 and 12 people, but usually you're going to be somewhere more in that 5 to 7 range.
And if we follow Chinese cosmology, we'll want an odd number, not an even.
Okay.
So those are the yang numbers, and the even are the yin.
Interesting.
Yeah. 3, good. 4, bad.
Oh.
Yeah. It kind of works too, because if you have 4, you can have a deadlock decision. That's why the Supreme Court has an odd number.
There's definitely value in having an odd number of people on a team. Yeah. But,
asymmetry is when all these beautiful food plates nowadays, they don't plate in the center of the plate anymore. They do swishes and swirls around the outside, and they use negative space. And I don't know. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm just hungry. It's dinner time. I was like, okay. I need a swoosh and a swirl of soy sauce or something.
Well, okay. So that's structure. We're talking about tasks, norms, and size. Number 5 is supportive organizational context. And this is like, what are all the supporting things that are going to help the team be successful? And this often gets skipped. So the 4 types of organizational support that they found to be most critical are rewards. So having reward strategies that recognize and reinforce team members for delivering on the team's accountabilities. If you say that the work that the team is doing is important, but people are only being rewarded based on the individual function work that they're doing, that's a problem, right? So looking at making sure you have an alignment with your reward systems for supporting what you want to see happening with this team.
Incentivize what you want to drive, for sure. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Napoleon said a soldier will fight hard and long for a piece of colored ribbon. Yeah. But it's not the colored ribbon. It's the honor. It's the recognition. It's the, I will fight long and hard for a quarterly bonus. I don't know, but like everyone's motivated by
people are motivated by
different things.
Yeah. So got to make sure your rewards match up with what you're actually trying to make happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and we incentivize salespeople based on their performance, like your salary, but the more they sell, the more they earn in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So rewards is a big one. Information. So the outstanding teams take action to acquire the data that they need in the form that they need it for their special purposes. So a lot of that is just making sure you have, whether it's a dashboard or whatever it is, the information coming in that the team needs in order to make good decisions and to be successful. Education, like leaders of outstanding teams are always identifying what do their teams not know and investing time and money to provide the educational resources that make them smarter and more capable over time. So never letting go of the education and development of the team members, both individually and as a team, and the team capabilities. And then the last one is resources. So these are like the basic materials for collaborative work, things like providing the ample time, space, staff support, like material resources. These are things that sound unimportant, but if you don't have them, then the team is not going to be able to do successful work. And then number 6 is, for the 6th team condition, is expert team coaching. And they kind of get into what team coaching is. I won't get too much into that since we defined it earlier in the episode. But sometimes that they talk about are especially good for team coaching. So early stage. So this is at the formation of a team. This is a really good time to create the energy and focus the team on its purpose. Midpoints. So if you're at like the halfway point through a cycle, meeting, project, whatever it is, this is a good time to reflect on what's working and what's not. And then at the end point of a project or team, it's a really good time to reflect on what can the team learn from to position it in the best way possible for future battles that it's going to face. And they definitely do talk about the benefits of bringing in a third party for coaching the team. It can be very difficult to coach the team as a leader unless you already have really worked to develop that skill set. But having somebody in to help the team get off on the right foot with coaching. But one of the beauties of this is you can actually develop these skills, and a good team coach is actually going to help people in the team develop the skills that they need in order to do this for each other. So the goal is to create a team that is ultimately like self-managing in the long run.
I think that's smart. It's a fresh perspective, and you as the leader are part of the team, right?
Yes.
So it's hard to object,
It's hard to be objective.
I've never enjoyed, I'll go back to a music analogy. I've almost never enjoyed a performance where the conductor is both playing the piano and conducting. Sorry, Leonard Bernstein. You're great at both, but doing both, there's a reason those are two different positions. It never quite works for me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very difficult to be objective. It's definitely true. So yeah, that's the episode.
Cool. I think it's fascinating. Like the way you talk about it, a team has its own life and identity. It's an entity in and of itself, right? And when you started this program, I actually thought it was really interesting. It's not the same as coaching each individual on a team. It's coaching the team as an entirety, and that probably includes the leader. You could not do that. I would love to have you coach my teams and me, right? Like that would be very productive. Also, this is not a plug for your services, but it kind of is. Like, Yeah,
it's very powerful.
It's very powerful, yeah.
I'm very excited. I've really enjoyed this program. And team coaching is very new as a field. Mm-hmm. Very, very new, actually.
I've never really heard it phrased in this way, yeah.
The International Coaching Federation only created a credential for it, I think a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
It's still very new, but it's very impactful.
As we know from your exploration of ADHD, you are an advanced being.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
So I think that's our show for this week.
Sounds good.
Thank you guys so much for listening again.
Thank you so much.
We will be back next week with Start With Why for Leadership Book Club.
I need to finish that. What's my why for finishing? Okay.
Well, we have a podcast we've committed to, and that's why we're recording on a Tuesday evening when it's kind of late and dark outside, and it's
so dark.
But we are committed to you guys.
I'm definitely should be committed.
Wow.
Anywho.
All right. Well, on that note.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. The Love and Leadership Podcast is produced and co-hosted by me, Kristen Brunn-Sharkey, and co-hosted by Mike Sharkey. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. We can't stress enough just how much these reviews help. You can follow us on LinkedIn under Kristen Brunn-Sharkey and Michael Sharkey, and on Instagram as Love Leader Pod. You can also find more information on our website, loveandleadershippod.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.